In just 19 seconds, $2.3 million in previously hidden donations, Pam Bondi didn't expect the microphone to stay hot. She didn't anticipate the leaked document. Cameras captured every nervous glance. The Senate chamber erupted in whispers. What did Bondi claim about public say-it that only revealed her own financial entanglements? At exactly 2:47 p.m. on a humid Tuesday afternoon, the mahogany doors of Senate Committee Room 216 swung open with unusual urgency. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across polished desks arranged in a perfect semicircle. C-SPAN cameras positioned strategically in each corner, their red recording lights blinking like mechanical heartbeats. The air conditioning hummed, but couldn't quite mask the tension radiating from every corner of the room. Pam Bondi walked in like she already owned the verdict, but her leather briefcase slipped slightly from her sweaty palm. Her navy blazer hung perfectly pressed, yet something in her posture suggested she was bracing for impact. The American flag behind the witness table drooped motionless, as if even the patriotic symbolism sensed what was coming. Reporters shuffled papers, their fingers hovering over smartphone screens, ready to tweet the first explosive moment. Senator Margaret Chen sat like a predator spotting weakness, her reading glasses perched precisely on her nose. A small pile of manila folders rested beside her, bottled water, each tab labeled with dates spanning back to her American flag pin caught the light as she adjusted her position, a subtle smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She had been waiting months for this hearing, and every piece of evidence was meticulously organized. The room held approximately 47 people, 12 senators, 8 committee staff members, 19 journalists, 6 security personnel, and 2 stenographers whose fingers never stopped moving. The gallery buzzed with nervous energy as lobbyists and political observers filled every available seat. Outside, protesters chanted demands for transparency, their voices barely audible through the thick glass windows. Bondi approached the witness microphone with calculated confidence, her heels clicking against the marble floor in measured steps. Her prepared statement lay open in a red binder, highlighted passages visible even from the press gallery. She cleared her throat twice, adjusted the microphone height, and glanced briefly at the C-SPAN camera positioned directly to her left. This was her moment to control the narrative about the Jeffrey Epstein file. The committee chairman gavelled the session to order at exactly 2:51 p.m. Bondi's opening statement began with rehearsed precision. Honorable members of this committee, the premature release of sensitive investigative materials poses significant risks to ongoing prosecutions and victim privacy. Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone who had delivered similar arguments in countless courtrooms across Florida. For 17 minutes and 38 seconds, Bondi methodically outlined her position. She cited federal precedents, referenced classified protocols, and invoked the sacred duty to protect vulnerable witnesses. Her arguments flowed smoothly, each point building toward her central thesis. Releasing the Epstein files would compromise justice rather than serve it. The senators listened politely, some taking notes, others checking their phone. But Senator Chen had been doing her homework. At exactly 3:09 p.m., Chen leaned into her microphone with surgical precision. Miss Bondi, before we continue, I'd like to direct your attention to some financial records that came to our attention this morning. Her words cut through the room like a blade through silk. Every head turned. The stenographer's fingers paused mid-keystroke. Even the security guards straightened their posture. Chen lifted a document from her manila folder, its pages crisp and official. According to campaign finance records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, your Political Action Committee received substantial donations from individuals with documented connections to Jeffrey Epstein's financial network. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Bondi's prepared composure cracked visibly. Her right hand gripped the edge of the witness table, knuckles whitening against the dark wood. "Senator, I'm not sure what records you're referring to," she began. But Chen was already reading specific figures. Between March 2018 and November 2020, the Florida Justice PAC, which you founded and controlled, received $2.3 million in donations from 7 different shell companies. Chen's voice remained steady, professional, devastating. These companies have since been traced back to Leslie Wexner's financial associates and to investment firms that managed Epstein-related trusts. The room exploded in whispers. Journalists' phones lit up with breaking news alerts. Camera operators zoomed in on Bondi's face, capturing every micro-expression of shock and calculation. The comfortable narrative she had constructed about protecting justice suddenly felt like quicksand beneath her feet. 19 seconds had passed since Chen began reading the financial records. 19 seconds that would define Bondi's entire testimony. Furthermore, Chen continued, her voice gaining momentum, internal emails obtained by this committee show that your office actively discouraged federal investigators from pursuing certain Epstein-related leads in Florida between. She held up a printed email chain, its subject line visible to the gallery. Coordination on ES matter. Proceed with caution. Bondi's jaw clenched visibly as she processed this second revelation. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush spreading across her cheeks. "Senator Chen, I believe you're mischaracterizing routine prosecutorial coordination," she stammered, but her voice had lost its earlier authority. The committee room had transformed from a routine hearing into a public dissection. Twitter erupted with hashtags. Don Bondi Files, Epstein cover, follow the money. CNN's breaking news banner scrolled across television screens in offices across Washington. MSNBC interrupted regular programming to broadcast the hearing live. Fox News found itself in the uncomfortable position of defending someone whose defense was crumbling in real time. Senator Chen wasn't finished. She lifted another document, this one bearing the official seal of the Florida Attorney General's office. This internal memo, dated September 15, 2019, shows your office recommended against pursuing certain witness testimonies that could have implicated additional high-profile individuals in Epstein's network. Her words landed like hammer blows against Bondi's credibility. The memo's existence sent shockwaves through both the hearing room and the broader political landscape. If accurate, it suggested that Bondi hadn't just received questionable donations, she had actively participated in limiting the scope of Epstein-related investigations. The very files she now claimed were too dangerous to release might contain evidence of her own obstructive actions. Bondi's breathing became visibly labored. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, nearly knocking over her prepared statement binder in the process. "These allegations are completely unfounded," she managed, but her voice cracked on the word unfounded. The microphone amplified every wavering syllable. "Ms. Bondi," Chen pressed forward relentlessly, "can you explain why your office closed 3 separate Epstein-related investigations without filing charges, despite having sufficient evidence according to the case files?" She held up a thick folder marked confidential in red letters. The question hung in the air like a sword over Bondi's head. Every person in the room understood its implications. If Bondi had buried legitimate investigations while taking money from Epstein's associates, her current arguments about protecting justice rang completely hollow. She wasn't defending the integrity of the legal system, she was protecting herself. Camera operators worked frantically to capture every angle of Bondi's deteriorating composure. Her forced smile had disappeared entirely, replaced by the hollow-eyed look of someone watching their career implode in real time. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the aggressive air conditioning. Her prepared talking points lay forgotten as she struggled to form coherent responses to Chen's surgical questioning. The press gallery buzzed with urgent phone calls to editors and producers. This wasn't just another routine hearing. It was a political execution broadcast live to the nation. Social media exploded with clips of Bondi's most uncomfortable moments, set to dramatic music and shared millions of times within hours. "Senator," Bondi finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "I would need to review these documents with my legal team before making any substantive response." It was the white flag of someone who had run out of ammunition. Chen nodded with the satisfaction of a chess master delivering checkmate. "Ms. Bondi, this committee will be requesting all records related to your financial relationships with Epstein Associates, as well as all communications regarding investigative decisions made by your office between 2018 and 20. Her tone was businesslike. Fine. The hearing continued for another hour, but everyone knew the decisive moment had already passed. Bondi's remaining testimony felt like the death throes of a wounded animal. Her arguments about protecting victims and preserving prosecutorial integrity rang hollow against the mounting evidence of her own compromised position. Outside the hearing room, protesters had gathered after watching the live stream on their phones. Their chants grew louder: "Release the files. Follow the money." The crowd swelled as word spread through social media about Bondi's devastating testimony. Police barriers kept them from the building's entrance, but their voices carried through the thick glass windows. By 4:30 p.m., Bondi's political allies had begun distancing themselves. Text messages flew balloon congressional offices as staffers scrambled to assess the damage. Republican leadership found themselves in the impossible position of defending someone whose defense had collapsed spectacularly in front of a national audience. The financial revelations weren't just embarrassing, they were potentially criminal. If prosecutors could prove that Bondi's actions were influenced by the donations her PAC received, she could face federal charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. The very files she had argued were too dangerous to release might now become crucial evidence in her own prosecution. Senator Chen closed her questioning with surgical precision. "Ms. Bondi, given these financial entanglements and the evidence of investigative interference, don't you think the American people deserve to see the complete Epstein files, regardless of your personal concerns?" It wasn't really a question, it was a statement of fact wrapped in parliamentary procedure. Bondi's final response was barely audible. "I maintain my position that premature disclosure could compromise ongoing investigations." But everyone in the room understood that her position had already been compromised beyond repair. The gavel fell at 4:37 p.m., ending what would be remembered as one of the most devastating congressional hearings in recent memory. Bondi gathered her papers with shaking hands, avoiding eye contact with the cameras that continued recording her every movement. Her expensive briefcase felt heavier as she walked toward the exit, each step echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. Within hours, evening news programs led with the story. Cable networks ran continuous coverage, analyzing every moment of Bondi's collapse. Political commentators debated whether she would resign before facing criminal charges. The hashtag 19 seconds began trending, referring to the brief moment when her entire argument fell apart. The irony was perfect and brutal. Pam Bondi had come to defend keeping the Epstein files secret in the name of justice, only to have her own secrets exposed in the name of transparency. Her argument that releasing the files would compromise prosecutions now seemed like projection. She was the one who had compromised prosecutions by burying them entirely. Late that evening, as Washington prepared for another news cycle, one question dominated every political conversation. If Bondi was willing to hide her own connections to protect herself, what else might be hidden in those files? Her spectacular failure had done more to build support for releasing the Epstein documents than any transparency advocate could have accomplished. The woman who claimed the files were too dangerous to release had proven in just 19 seconds that keeping them secret was far more dangerous. 3 days later, the fallout continued, devastating Bondi's credibility. Justice Department sources leaked additional records showing her PAC received $847,000 in consulting fees from firms representing Epstein associates. The payments aligned perfectly with controversial prosecutorial decisions. Former colleagues distanced themselves publicly. Miami prosecutors described cases that mysteriously lost priority. One assistant attorney general told CNN, "Investigations got quietly shelved. We were told it was resource allocation, but timing was suspicious." The most damning revelation came from a whistleblower within Bondi's former office. A career prosecutor leaked internal emails showing that Bondi had personally intervened to prevent interviews with key witnesses who might have provided testimony linking additional high-profile figures to Epstein's network. The emails revealed a systematic effort to limit the scope of investigations, not to protect victims, as she claimed, but to protect powerful individuals who might be implicated. Television appearances that had been scheduled for Bondi were quietly canceled. Republican fundraising events removed her name from speaker lists. The Trump campaign, which had previously considered her for a cabinet position, began signaling through back channels that she was no longer under consideration for any role in a potential administration. Legal experts across the political spectrum condemned her actions. Former federal prosecutors called for a special counsel investigation into whether Bondi had violated federal laws regarding obstruction of justice and conspiracy. The very precedents she had cited to justify keeping the files sealed were now being used to argue for her own prosecution. Social media continued its relentless mockery. TikTok users created viral videos comparing her 19-second downfall to famous source blunders and political gaffes. The hashtag Bondi collapse generated millions of views as content creators dissected every moment of her testimony frame by frame. Late-night comedians devoted entire segments to her spectacular failure, turning her earnest arguments about protecting justice into punchlines about protecting corruption. Confidence without facts is the fastest path to public humiliation. What happens when someone's argument for secrecy becomes the strongest argument for transparency? If corruption is exposed in real time, is justice ever truly served? This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and incidents are fictionalized for commentary and educational purposes. No defamation intended, only illustration of how truth emerges despite efforts to suppress it.